Commander Vextel stared at the main display screen with growing dread. The sight before him was something no station commander ever wanted to see. 300 Vorthok warships moved through space like a dark cloud of death, their hulls gleaming. With menace under the distant starlight, each ship was easily twice the size of anything the Zilani had ever built, and they moved with the confidence of predators who knew their prey was helpless. The communications console crackled with panicked voices from the outer colonies. Reports flooded in about the complete destruction of Mining Station Beta 7 and Research Outpost Kepler 12. The Vorthok hadn't bothered with demands or negotiations. They had simply appeared and begun systematically wiping out every living thing in their path. Sir, long-range sensors confirm it, reported Lieutenant Kexra from the sensor station, her voice shaking. The entire 3rd Defense Fleet has been destroyed. Admiral Mordok's flagship was vaporized along with all escort vessels. There were no survivors. Vextel closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. The research station housed over 50,000 civilians, including families, children, and elderly researchers who had dedicated their lives to peaceful scientific exploration. They had no weapons capable of fighting off even a single Vorthok destroyer, let alone an entire armada. "How long until they reach us?" he asked, though he already knew the answer would be grim. "At their current speed, approximately 4 hours," Sir Kexra replied. "Our evacuation transports were destroyed in the initial assault. We have no way to get everyone off the station." Thesis, the young communications officer, looked up from his console with desperate hope in his eyes. "Sir, what about calling for help? Surely someone in the galaxy will respond to a civilian distress call." "Who would come?" Vextel asked bitterly. "The Galactic Council's nearest peacekeeping force is 3 days away. The Altarian Navy is already fighting the Vorthok on the other side of the sector. Every civilized species is either too far away or too busy protecting their own people." The bridge fell silent except for the steady beeping of warning alarms. Everyone knew they were facing certain death. Vorthok were known throughout the galaxy as ruthless conquerors who showed no mercy to civilians. They would either enslave the survivors or kill them all. Vextal walked to the communications station and placed his hand on Tice's shoulder. A crazy idea was forming in his mind, something so desperate and dangerous that it violated every rule the Galactic Council had ever made. "Thesis, I want you to open all communication channels," he said quietly. "And I mean all of them." The young officer's eyes widened. "Sir, that would include the restricted frequencies, the ones marked as forbidden by the Council, especially those Vextal confirmed. Open the Deathworlder channels." Shocked silence filled the bridge. Every officer turned to stare at their commander in disbelief. The Deathworlder frequencies were absolutely forbidden by galactic law. The Council had made it clear that contacting those savage species was too dangerous to risk. "But sir," Thesis stammered, "the Council specifically warned us that Deathworlders are unpredictable and violent. They might be just as dangerous as the Vorthok." Vextel looked at the approaching enemy fleet on the display. "The Council isn't here, Thesis. They're not the ones about to die. Right now, I'll take dangerous allies over certain death." The night shift at Deep Space Monitoring Station Omega 7 was usually quiet. Most of the crew spent their time tracking commercial shipping routes and monitoring for space debris. Lieutenant Commander Park Sungman had been doing this job for 3 years, and he'd never received anything more exciting than a lost cargo freighter asking for directions. That changed at exactly 347 hours when every alarm in the station started. Screaming at once, Park nearly spilled his coffee as he lunged for the main console. The translation computers were working overtime, trying to decode a signal that was coming through on frequencies that weren't supposed to exist, at least not officially. "What the hell is this?" muttered Sergeant Lee Dongawuk from the secondary station. "The signal is coming from outside known space, but it's using our classified communication protocols." Park's eyes widened as he read the translated message scrolling across his screen. It was a desperate plea for help from something called the Zilani. They were under attack by a species called the Vorthok, and they were asking anyone who could hear them to come save them. "This is impossible," Park whispered. "How do they know about our emergency frequencies?" The Galactic Council told us that no alien species had access to these channels. The message kept repeating, growing more desperate with each transmission. Park could hear the fear in the alien voice, even through the mechanical translation. These weren't soldiers or warriors calling for backup. These were civilians begging for their lives. Sir Lee called out, "I'm detecting multiple alien languages in the background. It sounds like they're broadcasting this message on every frequency they can access. They're really scared."
Park made a decision that would change everything.
Me, Admiral Kim. Wake him up if you have to. This is Priority 1. Within minutes, Admiral Kim Tae-ho burst into the command center, still buttoning his uniform jacket. Kim was a veteran of the border wars, a man who had seen more combat than most soldiers could imagine. But even he looked shocked as he read the translated distress call. "They're asking for help against something called the Vorthok," Park explained. "The translation computers indicate this is a civilian research station with thousands of innocent people aboard. They're facing complete annihilation." Kim studied the tactical display that showed the alien signal's origin point. It was far outside. Human space, in a region that Earth's government had officially never explored. How long to reach their position? 72 hours at maximum burn, sir, Park replied immediately. "But Admiral, the Galactic Council specifically warned us never to respond to alien distress calls. They said it would be considered an act of aggression." Kim's jaw tightened. He remembered the Council's stern warnings about humanity's place in the galaxy. They had made it clear that humans were considered too dangerous and unpredictable to be trusted with galactic affairs. Earth was supposed to stay in its corner of space and mind its own business. Sir Lee added nervously, "If we respond to this call, we'll be violating every treaty we've signed. The Council could impose sanctions or even declare us a hostile species." Kim looked at the message one more time. He could almost hear the terror in those alien voices, the desperate hope that someone, anyone, would come to their aid. These were civilians facing extinction, and they had nowhere else to turn. "Regulations be damned," Kim said firmly. "Prep the fleet. We're going to war." The outer mining platforms were dying. Commander Vextall watched helplessly as the Vorthok fleet systematically destroyed each station with clinical precision. The massive enemy ships moved like predators, taking their time to ensure nothing survived their assault. Explosions bloomed across the view screen as another mining facility was reduced to glowing debris. "Platform 7 is gone," reported Lieutenant Kexra, her voice hollow with shock. "That's 3,000 more civilians lost. The Vorthok aren't even bothering to check for survivors." Vextall gripped the edge of his command chair. The research station's defensive shields were holding for now, but everyone knew they wouldn't last long against the Vorthok's superior firepower. He was about to order the crew to prepare for the end when the communication console suddenly came. "Alive. Incoming transmission," Dices called out, his voice cracking with surprise. "It's encrypted, but the signal is incredibly strong, much stronger than anything we've ever seen." The message that appeared on the main screen was unlike anything in the Zilani database. The translation was rough, but the meaning was clear and direct. No flowery diplomatic language, no complex protocols, just a simple statement of fact. "This is Admiral Kim of the human fleet. We received your distress call. Hold your position. Help is coming." The bridge fell silent. Every officer stared at the message in disbelief. After hours of sending out desperate calls for help, someone had finally answered, but the response raised more questions than it answered. "Commander," Thesis said slowly, "I've never heard of this human species before. Our databases show no record of first contact with any race called humans. How do they even know our language?" Vextall studied the message carefully. Translation protocols indicated that the original signal was in a completely unknown language, but somehow their computers had managed to decode it. That suggested an incredibly sophisticated communication system, possibly more advanced than anything the Galactic Council possessed. "Maybe they're a new species," suggested Lieutenant Kexra. "One that hasn't made official contact with the Council yet." Before anyone could respond, another message arrived. This one was longer and somehow more personal. The words carried a weight that made everyone on the bridge pause. "We're bringing friends. Humanity remembers its debts to those who call for help. Thysis looked completely confused. Commander, that doesn't make sense? We've never encountered humans before. How could we possibly have helped them? What debts are they talking about? Vextal read the message again, searching for hidden meanings. The phrasing was strange, almost philosophical. Most species in the galaxy were careful about making promises to strangers, especially when it came to military assistance. But these humans seemed to be suggesting that helping others was simply what they did. Maybe it's not about us specifically, Vextal said thoughtfully. Maybe they're talking about a debt to all innocent life. Some species have cultural beliefs about protecting the helpless. The communications console beeped again. This time, the message was much more technical. It contained detailed star charts, fleet positions, and an estimated time of arrival. The humans weren't just offering empty words of comfort. They were providing real tactical information. Sir, this is said, studying the new data, according to these calculations. They're coming from a sector that's supposed to be uninhabited, and the speed they're claiming, it's impossible. No ship in the galaxy can travel that fast. Vextal felt a strange sense of hope growing in his chest. Maybe these mysterious humans were different from other species? Maybe they actually meant what they said about coming to help. Something about their direct, no-nonsense communication style convinced him that salvation was indeed coming. Keep monitoring all frequencies, he ordered, and prepare a full briefing on the Vorthok fleet composition. If these humans are really coming to help us, they'll need to know what they're facing. Space itself seemed to tear apart as the massiveness human dreadnought materialized directly in the middle of the Vorthok formation. The sight was so shocking that both alien fleets stopped what they were doing and stared in complete disbelief. Ships weren't supposed to drop out of faster than light, travel that close to other vessels. The gravitational interference alone should have torn any ship apart. But there it was. A kilometer-long monster of black metal and glowing energy conduits, sitting calmly among 300 enemy warships like a shark that had just swum into. A school of fish, Captain Lee Sojin stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, her hands clasped behind her back as she watched the tactical display. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, their faces showing the calm focus that came from years of training and combat experience. "Damage report?" she asked calmly, as if dropping into the middle of an enemy fleet was just another. "Tuesday. Hull integrity at 100%, reported Chief Engineer Park Min-soo from his station. All systems nominal. The jump drive is already spinning up for emergency departure if needed." Lieutenant Nam Gi-woo looked up from the sensor console, his voice filled with professional interest rather than fear. "Captain, the Vorthok fleet is moving to surround us, counting exactly 307 ships ranging from destroyer, Class 2 heavy battlecruisers. They're trying to box us in." Lee nodded approvingly. 300 to 1. Those are the kind of odds I like to see. It means we won't have to hunt them down individually. The bridge crew exchanged glances. Most species would consider being outnumbered 300 to 1 a death sentence. But these were humans, and humans had a different relationship with impossible odds. "Open all communication channels," Lee ordered. "Let's introduce ourselves properly." The communication system crackled to life, broadcasting on every frequency that both fleets could receive. Lee's voice carried across the vacuum of space with the kind of calm authority that made even seasoned warriors pause. "This is Captain Lee Sojin of the human vessel Indomitable. You fired upon civilians and destroyed peaceful research. Stations, I'm giving you one chance to stand down and withdraw immediately. This is your only warning." The response from the Vorthok was immediate and predictable. Their commander, a cruel warrior named Greg Thor, had never backed down from a fight in his life. The idea that a single alien ship would dare threaten his entire fleet was so insulting that he didn't even bother to respond with words. Instead, every Vorthok ship in the formation opened fire at once. Hundreds of energy beams, plasma bolts, and missile volleys converged on the Indomitable from all directions. The attack was so intense that it should have vaporized any ship instantly. The combined firepower was enough to destroy a small moon, but something impossible happened. The human ship's armor didn't just deflect the attacks or absorb them. It seemed to drink in the energy, converting the destructive force into something else entirely. The black hull plating glowed with a soft blue light as it processed the incoming fire. "Shields holding at 98%, reported Lieutenant Choi Haijin from the defense station. "The new reactive armor is working perfectly. We're actually gaining power from their attacks." Lee smiled grimly. "Good. Now let's show them what happens when you attack innocents in front of humans." The Indomitable began to move, and the Vorthok fleet realized they had made a terrible mistake. The Vorthok fleet moved like a pack of hungry wolves, surrounding the lone human ship with practiced precision. 300 warships formed attack formations that had crushed countless civilizations. Across the galaxy, their commanders felt confident, almost amused by the audacity of this single alien vessel that dared to challenge their entire armada. "Captain," Lee So-jin watched the tactical display with the calm focus of a chess master studying her next move. The enemy ships were positioning themselves exactly where she wanted them, clustering together in tight formations that would maximize their firepower, but also make them perfect targets for what was about to happen. "All stations report ready," announced Lieutenant Naam Ji-woo from the weapons console. "The Vorthok are closing to optimal firing range. They're not even trying to maintain defensive spacing." Lee nodded slowly. The enemy was making this easier than she had expected. Centuries of easy victories had made them careless and overconfident. They fought like bullies who had never faced real opposition. "Weapons free," she ordered, her voice carrying the cold finality of a judge pronouncing sentence. "Show them what Deathworlders do to bullies." The Indomitable unleashed hell. The first volley came from the kinetic bombardment system, a weapon that most civilized species considered barbaric and primitive. Tungsten rods the size of telephone poles accelerated to incredible speeds, punching through Vorthok energy shields like they were made of paper. The projectiles didn't explode or release energy. They simply transferred their massive kinetic force directly into the enemy hulls, tearing through armor and structure with devastating effect. "Direct hits on 12 targets," reported Nam. "Dare. Their shields can't handle solid projectiles moving at those speeds." But the kinetic weapons were just the beginning. The Indomitable revealed weapon systems that violated several galactic warfare conventions. Devices that the Galactic Council had banned as too dangerous for civilized combat. Nuclear torpedoes streaked out from the human ship's launch tubes, weapons that the Zilani had always believed were purely theoretical. The warheads detonated in perfect sequence among the enemy formations, each explosion creating a miniature sun that vaporized everything within 1,000 kilometers. "Fusion cascade successful," announced engineer Cho Minho from his station. "We're reading complete hull breaches on 47 enemy vessels. The nuclear yields are performing exactly as calculated." The Vorthok fleet, which had seemed so overwhelming moments before, suddenly found itself facing losses they had never experienced. Ships that had terrorized the galaxy for decades were being destroyed by weapons they didn't even understand. Panic spread through the enemy ranks like wildfire. Commanders who had spent their careers crushing weaker opponents suddenly found themselves facing an enemy that fought with techniques they had never encountered. Captain Cho called out, monitoring the enemy communications. "We're receiving multiple surrender requests from the Vorthok fleet. They're asking for terms." Lee's expression didn't change. She had seen the reports from the destroyed research stations, the footage of innocent civilians being vaporized without warning. These weren't soldiers surrendering after an honorable battle. These were murderers who had finally met someone stronger than themselves. "Tell them it's too late for that," she replied coldly. "They had their chance to withdraw when I warned them. They chose to fire on civilians instead." The Indomitable continued its methodical destruction of the enemy fleet. Each weapon system worked with precision, targeting specific ships and eliminating them with minimal waste of ammunition. This wasn't random violence or revenge. This was calculated justice being delivered by people who understood the difference between warfare and murder. The single human ship carved through the Vorthok fleet like a blade through silk, leaving nothing but debris and regret in its wake. The Vorthok fleet was still reeling from the devastating attack by the single human ship, when reality itself seemed to split apart. Commander Vextal watched from his research station as dozens of tiers in space-time opened simultaneously, each one glowing with the eerie blue light of faster-than-light travel. What emerged from those portals defied everything the Zilani knew about military tactics and fleet coordination. 50 human warships materialized in perfect formation, their movements so synchronized that they seemed to share a single mind. Destroyers, cruisers, and massive carriers took their positions with mathematical precision, creating a web of overlapping fire zones that instantly trapped what remained of the Vorthok armada. "Impossible," breathed Lieutenant Kexra from the sensor station. How did they coordinate their arrival so perfectly? The timing required for that kind of maneuver should be beyond any species' capability. But there they were, 50 ships moving as one, their black hulls gleaming with the same energy-absorbing armor that had made the Indomitable nearly invulnerable. At the center of the formation, the largest vessel took position directly alongside Captain Lee's ship. Its hull markings identified it as the Defiant, and even from a distance, everyone could feel the authority it radiated. Admiral Kim Taho's voice cut through the chaos of battle. It's broadcasting on all frequencies with the calm confidence of someone who had done this many times before. "This is Admiral Kim of the human fleet. All Vorthok vessels, you are now completely surrounded. Your options are surrender or destruction. Choose quickly." The response from the Vorthok was predictable. Even facing impossible odds, their warrior culture wouldn't allow them to surrender to what they saw as inferior aliens. The remaining 200 enemy ships regrouped and launched a desperate counterattack against the human formation. What happened next would be talked about in military academies for generations. The human fleet moved like a living thing, each ship anticipating the other's movements with uncanny accuracy. When Vorthok forces concentrated their fire on one vessel, 2 others would immediately move to shield it, while a third flanked the attackers from an unexpected angle. "They're not just fighting as individual ships," Thysis whispered, his voice filled with awe. "They're fighting as a single organism." "How is that possible?" Commander Vextal studied the tactical display, trying to understand what he was witnessing. The human ships were throwing themselves into attacks that seemed almost suicidal, charging directly into enemy formations that should have torn them apart. But somehow, their coordination was so perfect that what looked like reckless aggression was actually calculated precision. They trained for this, he realized suddenly. Look at how they move. Every maneuver is designed to work when outnumbered. They expect to face superior numbers, so they've developed tactics that turn numerical disadvantage into an advantage. The human destroyer Relentless demonstrated this principle perfectly. When surrounded by 6 Vorthok cruisers, instead of trying to escape, it dove directly into the center of the enemy formation. The move should have been suicide, but the other human ships had anticipated it exactly. As the Relentless drew enemy fire, the cruiser Vengeance and the destroyer Fury hit the Vorthok formation from opposite sides, creating a devastating crossfire that eliminated all 6 enemy ships in seconds. "It's beautiful," Kexra whispered. "Terrifying, but beautiful. They fight like they expect to die, but refuse to lose." The human fleet continued its deadly dance through space, each ship covering another in an endless cycle of mutual support. Their tactics seemed almost suicidal to outside observers, but the results spoke for themselves. The Vorthok fleet, which had seemed invincible just hours before, was being systematically dismantled by an enemy that refused to follow conventional rules of engagement. The Vorthok fleet was breaking apart. For the first time in their violent history, these ruthless conquerors were experiencing something they had never felt before: genuine fear. Ships that had terrorized entire star systems were being destroyed faster than their crews could process what was happening. Commander Gregthor, the Vorthok fleet leader, stared at his tactical display in disbelief. In less than an hour, he had lost over half his armada to an enemy force that was smaller than his own. The humans fought with a brutality that made even his hardened warriors uncomfortable. But it was their precision that truly terrified him. "All remaining ships fall back to the jump point," he ordered through gritted teeth. We'll regroup at the staging area and call for reinforcements. The surviving Vorthok vessels began a desperate retreat, their engines glowing white-hot as they pushed toward the edge of the system where they could escape into faster-than-light travel. For a brief moment, it seemed like they might actually make it. That's when Admiral Kim's voice cut through space like a blade. Translated simultaneously into every language the galaxy had ever recorded. His words were calm, measured, and absolutely final. You came here to destroy innocence. You don't get to leave and try again somewhere else. On the bridge of the Defiant, Lieutenant Commander Park Sung-min coordinated the pursuit with the cold efficiency of someone who had done this before. Multiple holographic displays showed the positions of every fleeing enemy vessel, their projected courses, and the optimal intercept patterns for the human fleet. "Sir, we're tracking 47 remaining enemy formations," Park reported. "They're scattered across a wide area, but they're all heading for the same jump point. At their current speed, the lead ships will reach escape velocity in 18 minutes. Admiral Kim studied the tactical display with the patience of a hunter who knew his prey was already trapped. The Vorthok were running in panic, abandoning their formations and leaving their weaker ships behind. It was exactly what he had expected. "Negative," Kim replied firmly. "No one leaves this system alive. Hunt them down. All of them." The human fleet split into smaller hunting groups, each one designed to intercept specific clusters of fleeing enemies. The destroyers Thunder and Lightning moved to cut off the northern escape route, while the cruisers Justice and Retribution positioned themselves to block the southern corridor. What followed was not a battle, but an execution. The ships, already damaged and demoralized, stood no chance against the coordinated human assault. One by one, they were hunted down and destroyed with methodical precision. The destroyer Hammer caught up with 3 fleeing Vorthok cruisers just as they thought they had reached safety. Captain Yoon Jae-soon didn't bother with warnings or demands for surrender. His ship simply opened fire, and 3 more enemy vessels became expanding clouds of debris. "Target destroyed," Yoon reported calmly, moving to intercept the next group. Commander Grathor's own flagship was among the last to fall. The massive Vorthok dreadnought had almost reached the jump point. When the human cruiser Vengeance materialized directly in its path, the 2 ships exchanged fire for less than a minute before the alien vessel exploded in a brilliant flash of light. Lieutenant Commander Park monitored the systematic destruction from his station, checking each enemy vessel off his list as it was eliminated. "Sir, that's the last of them. All Vorthok ships have been destroyed. No survivors detected." Kim nodded with satisfaction. The message would be clear to anyone who investigated the aftermath. Humanity did not tolerate attacks on innocent civilians. There would be no survivors to report back to the Vorthok Empire, no witnesses to describe human tactics or capabilities. The battle was over. But the real war was just beginning. The last Vorthok ship had been destroyed less than an hour ago, and the debris fields stretched across thousands of kilometers of space. Commander Vextel stood on his bridge, watching the human fleet regrouping in perfect formation. After witnessing their devastating military capabilities, he and his crew were preparing for the inevitable demands that would come next. Throughout galactic history, the pattern was always the same. A stronger species would defeat a weaker one, then demand payment in the form of territory, resources, or slaves. The Zilani had just witnessed the most efficient military operation in recorded history. They knew they would have to pay a price for their salvation. Commander Lieutenant Kexra said nervously, "We're receiving a transmission from the human flagship. Should I prepare the surrender protocols?" Vextel nodded grimly. "Put it through. Let's see what they want from us." Admiral Kim's face appeared on the main view screen, and the Zilani were surprised by what they saw. Instead of the cruel expression of a conqueror, Kim looked genuinely concerned. His uniform was simple and practical, without the elaborate decorations that most galactic leaders wore to display their power. "Commander Vextal," Kim began, his voice carrying the same calm authority that had coordinated the destruction of an entire fleet. "I hope you and your people are unharmed. Do you need medical assistance or emergency supplies? We have hospital ships standing by if you have wounded." The bridge fell silent. Every Zilani officer stared at the screen in confusion. This wasn't how conquering species were supposed to behave. Where were the demands for tribute? Where were the threats and ultimatums? I don't understand, Vextal stammered. Admiral, you just saved our entire civilization. Surely you must want something in return. Kim looked genuinely puzzled by the question. We want to know if you're okay. That's all that matters right now. The simple honesty in his voice was more shocking than any weapon the humans had displayed. Commander Vextal felt his understanding of the universe shift as he processed what he was hearing. But why? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why did you help us? We've never met before. We have no alliance, no treaty, no mutual defense agreements. Your species traveled across the galaxy to fight a war that wasn't yours. Why would you do that? Kim's response was immediate and matter-of-fact, as if the answer should have been obvious. Because you asked, and because it was right. That's what civilized species do. The words hit the Zilani like a physical blow. In all their centuries of membership in the Galactic Council, they had never heard such a simple, direct statement of moral principle from any species. Captain Lee Sojin's voice joined the conversation from her own ship. We've been where you are, Commander. We know what it's like to face an enemy that wants to destroy everything you care about. Someone has to stand up to bullies even when it's dangerous. The young communications officer, whispered what everyone on the bridge was thinking. They're not asking for anything. They really just came to help. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on anyone. The so-called Deathworlders that the Galactic Council had warned them about had proven more civilized than the Council itself. While the official galactic government had policies against helping species in distress, these humans had risked everything to save strangers. Admiral Vextal said slowly, the Galactic Council told us that humans were dangerous and unpredictable. They said your species couldn't be trusted. Kim smiled sadly. Maybe they're right about the dangerous part, but we hope they're wrong about the rest. The human fleet was preparing to leave, their ships moving into departure formation with the same precision they had shown in battle. Commander Vextal stood on his bridge, watching the alien vessels that had saved his entire civilization. For the first time in hours, he had a moment to truly think about what had just happened. The Galactic Council had spent years warning every species about the dangers of contact with humans. They had painted Earth's people as violent, unpredictable creatures who would bring chaos to the orderly galaxy. The Council had made it clear that humans were too dangerous to be trusted with galactic citizenship, but as Vextal watched the human ships carefully avoiding the debris field to prevent any damage to Zilani rescue vessels, he finally understood what the Council really feared. It wasn't humanity's weapons, though they were certainly impressive. It wasn't even their willingness to die in combat, though that was terrifying to witness. What truly scared the Galactic Council was humanity's refusal to let evil triumph, even when it meant risking everything for complete strangers.
They're
not like us, Lieutenant Kexra said quietly, monitoring the human fleet's movements. Most species calculate the cost before helping others. These humans didn't even hesitate. They just came. Vextal nodded slowly. The implications were staggering. If word of this spread throughout the galaxy, other species would start asking uncomfortable questions about why the Council had policies against helping civilizations in distress. The human example would make the existing galactic order look selfish and cowardly by comparison. Admiral Kim Vextal said, opening a communication channel to the human flagship. Before you leave, I have a formal request to make. Kim's face appeared on the view screen, looking curious but patient. Of course, Commander, what can we do for you? The Zilani government formally requests to open diplomatic relations with Earth, Vextal announced, his voice carrying the weight of history. We would be honored to call humanity our allies. The bridge crew around him straightened with pride. This was more than just a political statement. This was a choice to stand with the species that had proven themselves when it mattered most. Kim smiled warmly. And for a moment, the hardened military commander looked almost touched by the gesture. The honor would be ours, Commander. The galaxy just got a little smaller. As the human ships began their jump to faster-than-light travel, their forms slowly fading into the familiar blue glow of FTL transition. Thaisis turned to his commander with a worried expression. "Sir, what do we tell the Galactic Council?" "They're going to demand a full report about what happened here. I want to know everything about the humans, their capabilities, their intentions." Bextall continued watching the space where the human fleet had been just moments before. The area was empty now, but somehow it felt different. The humans had left their mark on this corner of the galaxy, and nothing would ever be quite the same. "We tell them the truth," he said firmly. "We tell them that when we called for help, only one species answered. We tell them that the so-called Deathworlders just saved us all." Lieutenant Kextra was already preparing the official report, but she paused at her console. "Sir, do you think the Council will listen? Will they change their policies about human contact?" Vextal smiled grimly. "They'll listen because they won't have a choice. Word of this will spread to every species in the galaxy.
Ow.
Everyone will know that when the Vorthok came to murder innocent civilians, humanity was the only species brave enough to stop them. The galaxy would never be the same. The humans had proven that there was another way, a better way, to handle the darkness that existed among the stars, and that example would inspire others to follow."